Hey guys, welcome to episode 9 of the Destroy Android shooter game. In this episode, we are going to create our countdown timer, which will give the user 30 seconds to kill as many androids as possible. This is going to require a few things. It's going to include a new clock subclass, which is going to fire off every second to represent our timer. And we'll need a game over label so that to display to the user at the top of the screen. And a lot of this is stuff we've already done before, so hopefully you can actually do this on your own. But if not, we're going to walk through it now. So, starting with our game clock, we're going to almost like mimic that. So, down here, I'm going to group them together. If I can find my game clock. Okay, so here's my game clock. And instead of calling it game clock, I'm just going to call this countdown clock. And our timer is going to do two things. It's going to decrement our time integer, and it's going to check to see if the time is 0, and if it is, it's going to call game over. So to use that, we're going to need to create an int that's going to keep track of our time. So, let's get to the top here. So I'm going to create a new int time variable. And I'm just going to make the game last 30 seconds. So here I'm going to set time to 30 seconds. And going back down here to our countdown clock in the timer, we need to decrement our time. And now we need to check to see if it's 0 or not. So if time is 0, then we're going to create some kind of game over method. So here I'm going to leave this empty for now. We'll fill that in a second. But the first thing we want to do now is, since we already have our our clock subclass, let's go ahead and instantiate it back up here in the define. So similar to the way we did game clock, we're now going to have this countdown clock. And then the same thing here. I'm just copying and pasting to make this go a little faster. So we have countdown clock and countdown. Okay, so the difference is for the time interval. So we want this to be like a regular timer, so we want it to fire off every second. So the value you pass in is the number of milliseconds that you want the clock to fire off at. Since we want it to be a second, we want this to be 1000. And we want the timer to be enabled true. Okay? And one thing we're going to want to do too is we're going to want to create a new label so we can actually display this timer to the user. So I'm going to create a new label really fast, and we'll just call this time left label. And I'll have an update time method. So let's create that method. All the update time method is going to do is it's going to take our label and it is going to set it to be the value of time. So let's see, what did I call it? I called it time left label. So time left label dot text is going to be the time left plus the actual time. Okay, so now it should start off at 30. Going back down here to our subclass, we have this game over method. So what is that going to want to do? That wants to stop everything. So we want to remove the ship from view. We want to stop the countdown clock and the game clock and stop the accelerometer, all that stuff, because the game is officially over at this point. So to do that, I'm going to, it's actually going to be similar to the way we did our on pause and on resume. I'm going to take our game clock and I'm going to set the enable to be false. I'm going to take our controller and set it to false. And let's go ahead and make our ship invisible. Just so, because then if the ship's not there, it makes more visual sense. And then we need to do a couple more things. One, we want to create our game over label, which we have not done yet. And then secondly, we don't want the user to be able to keep firing bullets. Now, I don't know of a way to disable touch events from the game canvas that we created. So instead what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a separate game over variable that gets set right here in the game over method. Then what that's going to do is in my touched method of my game canvas, before I call my fire missile method, I'm just going to check, well, if the game is over, then don't fire. So here, let's go ahead and assume we have a game over variable. And up here, I'm going to create that new Boolean. And then in my touched method, which is in my game canvas. So right here, I don't want to do either of these things if the user has already finished the game. So if it is not game over, meaning if game over is false, then I want to do these. Otherwise, I don't want to do anything. Set the visibility to be false. And finally, we need to actually give it the text. So game over label.text equals game over. All right, and actually because these are all going to be in the same horizontal arrangement, I want to give it a little bit of a buffer. So I'm going to tab it out some just to give some more white space between all the labels. And oh, you know what? We actually forgot to instantiate our time left label. So let's go ahead and do that now. I'm just going to copy this down. And this is going to be time left label. And we'll put it before the game label. We want to make sure the visibility is true because we always want it to be shown. I don't really want it to be bold. And finally, I'm going to call update the time. Actually, we already did it down here. So I'm going to move this upwards. Okay. So now we have all of our labels in place. So now that we have our label up, we want to make sure we enable it when the game over happens. So scrolling back down to our game over method that we created, I'm going to say take my game over label, and now I'm going to set its visibility to be true. All right. I think that's do it. Let's just go over it one more time. We disabled our game clock, and actually let's go ahead and disable our time left clock. What did I call it? The countdown clock. We're going to make sure we disable that. Game over is now true, controller is disabled, ship is invisible, and now our game over label is visible. So if we go ahead and run this in our emulator, we should see the countdown timer at the top, counting down, and we should see the game over label show when the 30 seconds are up. Okay, as you can see, our clock is going down by 1 each time. Uh, there is lag because, again, I'm running this in the emulator. I'm going to speed this up so we can get down to 0. Okay, as you can see, our time left went down to 0. The clock stopped, the ship went away, I can't fire, and our game over label is up. One thing I did forget to do, which I've already put in, is I forgot to put in this update time in our timer for our countdown clock. So it was working, it's just the time wasn't updating to the user game, so you can start all over again. Okay, I'll see you then. Okay, as you can see, our time left went down to 0. The clock stopped, the ship went away, I can't fire, and our game over label is up. One thing I did forget to do, which I've already put in, is I forgot to put in this update time in our timer for our countdown clock. So it was working, it's just the time wasn't updating to the user. One thing I did just realize though is the Android guy makes the explosion sound whenever he hits the bottom of the screen. Now we don't want that, we only want it to be when either the bullet blows up the Android or the Android guy hits the ship. So what I'm going to do is, here we had this play the boom sound no matter what. Now this collision apparently is also called when it hits the edge of the screen. So instead of putting it there, I'm going to just put it individually at the top of each of these if statements. And that will fix that. Alright, that is the end of this tutorial. For the next one, we are going to create a reset button which will reset the state of our game so you can start all over again. Okay, I'll see you then.